Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Anissa Barbosa, an assistant district attorney in Uvalde, Texas. My involvement in NCAA leadership development programs as a student athlete and as a young professional have no doubt prepared me for success in my legal career. As a softball student athlete, I attended the Student Athlete Leadership Forum. This transformational opportunity taught me the importance of collaboration, self-awareness, and service. And from that, I was inspired to pursue a service-oriented career in the law. While in law school, I was selected for the postgraduate internship program at the NCAA National Office. I had a front row seat to historic changes in events in college athletics, such as the evolution of name, image, and likeness and the NCAA's response to COVID-19. The fast-paced environment and unexpected crisis management experience I gained gives me the confidence to enter the courtroom as a felony prosecutor today. Enjoy the episode.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is Keiko Price. Keiko is the Associate Vice President of Campus Life and Director of Athletics at Emory. Greetings, Keiko. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I am glad you're on. Now, you've been in that role for almost 3 years. Stops in the past at Illinois, Berkeley, and Stanford, and you've been in the industry for almost 20 years. So we're glad to have you on. You have a wealth of experience, and I believe this should be a great conversation. Now, one thing I did notice on your bio is that you were a 22-time All-American. I'm like, I played football. You can only be an All-American one per season in football, but I guess you are a swimmer, so there's multiple opportunities to be an All-American. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was a swimmer at UCLA, and although I was a sprinter, so I specialize in the 50 free and 100 free, I swam in a lot of relays as well.
Okay.
And my third event was 200 freestyle, so that was mid-distance, but a lot of opportunities to accumulate the All-American honors just through the combination of individual events and relays at the national championships.
Right, which is impressive. So, working in this industry, you're an advocate for sports, I assume, right? I'm an advocate for sports, even though I'm industry adjacent. Worked with football coaches a long time, and you always think about the classroom, outside of the classroom, in terms of what you learn from sports. And I wonder about being a swimmer. I understand diligence, I understand competition, but tell me about the team aspect. I always wonder this when I talk to people who ran track too, the team aspect of being an individual competing on your own, but you're also a part of a team, and then how that translates now that you are in the athletics director role.
Yeah, so, swimming is an individual event in many aspects. I mean, it's you against the clock. You're racing against your time. You're racing against the person next to you, but the accumulation and the combination of all the scores is how it, translate to being a team environment and a team sport. But really, I think even more importantly is the day-to-day of the sport. Now that I'm retired, I actually swim with a master's program because swimming by yourself is so monotonous. It's so boring. It is, I wouldn't say it's fun. And so the team aspect of it is having 30 women in the pool training together to push each other when you're looking at a black line for 2 hours at a time. And just the day-to-day grind of not just being in the pool, but all the other parts of what comes into play to perform at a high level. So the strength and conditioning aspect, study hall, the dry land workouts that we did, all of that makes it a team effort. And I think in the work that I do now, I really believe that it takes a village to make it through this business. And so I focus on creating an environment in my department where everyone is working together, whether it be my strategy for involving the entire athletic department in creating our new vision and mission and values, or just my leadership style with our leadership team and having them involved in every decision that we make. It's very important. And I'm only as strong as the rest of the village. And so I really believe that there's a lot of correlation between swimming and how I operate
which is
my
which is
department.
is interesting. Swimming, you see people breaking records over the last few years, and I don't know how to interpret that. But as a swimmer, when you see times that people are swimming now, is this like, man, this person,
Oh,
yeah,
like what? They got something in the chlorine. I
is
don't
that
know what they're eating.
that's hilarious.
I don't know how much they're lifting. I do know that the training is different, but and maybe the technique, but it is so fast.
Yeah,
I don't fully comprehend
I
how
I agree.
how athletes are posting the times that they're posting, but it's also exciting to see.
Yeah, it has to be. So in the chair for almost 3 years. At some point over 20 years in the industry, the evolution of leadership, right? You come to learn how to have tough discussions or tough conversations. You come to learn how to be strategic in terms of thinking about the outcomes after the decision. But then there's also an aspect of making uncomfortable decisions, right? I've heard other athletic directors talk about making a decision that challenges two of your core values, and you got to decide which one to make because the decision has to be made. I wonder about you. At what point did you accept that uncomfortable decisions were a part of leadership? And also, if you have an example of an uncomfortable decision that you could share with us.
Yeah, so I've had to make uncomfortable decisions throughout my career, and
Mm-hmm.
definitely as I ascended in my career, the higher up you go, the more you get paid to make those tough decisions. And I think, one thing I do want to talk a little bit about is that line that you have to establish as an athletic director, that due diligence that you have to have when it comes to student athlete welfare. And I'll just say student athlete accusations. We see a lot of it in Division One, Two, and Three, where a student athlete is feeling like they're being mistreated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes they're providing information that's valuable and accurate, and sometimes it's not. And what I feel like we don't talk about is when it's not. And so I feel like it is my job definitely to protect the student athletes, but I also have a duty to advocate for our coaches. And there's been times throughout my career where students will come forward um, with accusations of being bullied or being mistreated or the coach being racist. And, it kind of makes you think, wow, is this really going on under my purview? And I did not see this. And in particular, when student athletes as a Black woman are accusing coaches of being racist, I take that very seriously. But I think what I have had to do is make sure that the student athlete is feeling supported, but also support the coach. And so there's been times in my career and even here at Emory where I've had to have or to do an assessment where everyone is involved, right? So it's not just the student athlete's word against the coach, and then that's what it is, right? It's taking the time to assess, to hear both sides, to talk to support staff, to involve parents as needed, to really get to the root of the issue. And I've had to deal with that here at Emory, where there was an accusation about a coach being racist, and really just kind of digging through that to find out what was really, really going on. It's something that I feel like it's important, and there are coaches that are losing their jobs over
Yeah,
this. And so, how do we make sure that we're doing things the right way and involving the right people in the room to ultimately make the decision?
that's that. You see a lot of that now, right? In terms of so you see a lot of it in multiple sports. You see a whole lot of it when it comes to women's sports.
Yes.
And I've always wondered about the due diligence of finding out exactly what happened. If you just read the articles, as you mentioned, you see a student accused. You say they seem like they may have asked a couple other students, and then the coach is fired. But
Yes.
what is the due diligence to find out what exactly happened? The whole 360 view of what happened after going through something like that, whether it be there at Emory or in the past. Have you created your own internal process of assessment to be able to find out either, the one perspective versus the other perspective versus the truth? Like, tell me about your process in that type of situation.
Yeah, I think it varies from situation to situation, but in general, I think what I try to do, and it's been a little bit harder for me in the chair because of time commitments, but really being present as much as I can around a program. So you learn a lot just being at practice, traveling, being on the sidelines, right?
Yeah.
Just being there, and so you really know what the coach is doing. I think that's number one, very, very important. And I got a lot of experience with that at Illinois due to the organizational structure that was in place there. We had dedicated sport administrators where that was, their primary job was to be present and to be able to really know the ins and outs of what was going on a day-to-day basis. And so, I think that's important. I think um, definitely spending a lot of time with coaches and being engaged with them, hearing them out, understanding their values and philosophy, having that trust is important upon hire. But then also balancing that with, if you know what's going on with your coaches, if you're around the programs and when there is an accusation that comes forth, you will be able to know if there's what's really, really going on. Is a student athlete not getting playing time and they want playing time, so they're going to try to throw the coach under the bus? Or is it the parents who thought that their child was better than what they are and they're not as good as they thought, and so they're trying to influence their child and the coach on decisions that are being made? Is it, a toxic culture that's been passed down from generation to generation? But I think, that's generally my approach. And then, when situations do arise, I think it's important to talk to multiple stakeholders to really get as much information as you can before making a decision or before making an accusation.
Right. Something you said there has me thinking about showing up to practice, right? You think about at a school like Illinois, where you might have multiple sport administrators, and so this person can be at practice more often, and they just become a part of the scenery. So the coach is going to be who they are, no matter who's at practice. Now, Emory, I believe it is probably a little different. Staff is probably not as big. So then when you show up, like is the coach putting on a show? If the coach is toxic, will they be toxic when you disappear, or will they be toxic when you're standing at practice? Tell me about that when you don't have as big a staff for people to become a part of the scenery in terms of sport administration.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that they're going to be their authentic self
Right.
24/7, and at some point they will be exposed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's definitely more difficult when you're sharing a caseload of 13 coaches amongst two people. But I think, you know, when you're around people enough, it's going to come out sooner than later. So
Yeah.
if
Right.
I'm not at
Yeah.
practice, I'll see it in the office, right? I'll see
Mm-hmm.
it in my one-on-ones. And, I think that's where just making sure that you make good hires is important. But I'm not so concerned about that here at Emory.
Right.
But I get your point. I get your point. People can put on a front, but I
Right.
always
Yeah.
believe that it's eventually gonna catch up with you.
They come out at some point.
It's
I asked
gonna.
that question because I played for Nick Saban at Michigan State. Nick Saban was Nick Saban.
It
You
didn't
could be
matter.
president of university. It doesn't matter. Maybe if there were parents out there, it might soften a little bit, but for the most part, everybody was getting cussed out. And no matter who you are, Jack. So
Yeah, and if you're going to get cussed out at practice, you're going to get cussed out at the game. So, and I'll
yeah,
see it
right.
at the game. So,
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, you're right about that. So yeah, I think that's interesting. Tell me about that aspect of you and the deputy over 13 sports, I believe it is.
mhm.
Tell me how do you two manage making sure you're present? You mentioned being present. That's something that's important to you, I assume. How do you manage that and run a department and run campus recreation? Just the whole aspect of everything being in the chair there at Emory.
Yeah, so I will admit, it has not been easy. I was just talking to a coach this morning about how I feel like I'm pulled in so many different directions. I haven't been
Mm-hmm.
able to be as present as I would like. I haven't been able
Right.
to go to practices as much as I would like. That's my goal for this year is to just be more visible, travel more besides just postseason. But Devin Hendricks is my deputy AD. She's here from UT Austin. She and I touch base on a weekly basis regarding high level issues that may come up with our programs. And I think just that communication and communicating with our leadership team. We meet once a week involving sports med, student athlete development, compliance, our senior women administrator, just having those multiple touch points um, is very, very important so that we're all on the same page. But yeah, it has not been easy. I will say that's one thing that I feel guilty about almost because one of the big differences between my previous institutions and Emory is that I do report to student affairs. And so with that, I am a member of the executive team for student affairs. We call it our student affairs division is called Campus Life here at Emory. And so I am expected to meet with my boss, Enku Galai, and her executive team of 4. We meet every day. I'm expected to be present at events on campus for the
Wow.
students, not just the athletes. So I went to 6 different graduations. I was at every orientation event.
Wow.
I'm included in multiple searches that are not in athletics and rec. And so, my calendar fills up pretty quickly. And so I think that has been probably the biggest adjustment for me to Division 3 is many Division 3 institutions, and in particular in our conference, report to student affairs. And I think there's a lot of benefits that come with that, but it's definitely time consuming, just not just physically, but I also have to be engaged in what is going on in the student affairs space. So whether that be emails or articles that I'm reading or different touch points throughout the day with my colleagues, it's more than just the athletes that I'm in the know about. I know what's going on with every group on campus, whether it be a
Yeah.
medical issue, a security issue, a housing issue. And so the great thing about that is I can then communicate that information to our coaches and our student athletes. But it's pulling me away from
It yeah, sounds
what
like
I'm
a whole
used to
lot
being
actually.
able to do. So it hasn't been easy.
You, you said you meet every day. Man, that's just like
Yeah.
how do you I don't know. Maybe that's the nature of working in an or I got fired from the AFCA back in 2017, 6 years ago, and I haven't been in the organization, but we definitely didn't meet every day. And that just seems like a whole lot of time that I could be out doing the job I was hired to do. But I guess the job you're hired to do includes that because you're also assistant or associate vice president of
Yes.
student life. So it's all
Every day but
inclusive.
Friday. I will take that back. But yeah,
Okay.
so it's and partly too is because our leadership team is fairly new. I'm actually my boss's first hire, and I was hired 2.5 years ago. We just hired a dean of students who oversees community and belonging. She started in June. Our our AVP for health and well-being, he started a year ago. So I think some of that is just really understanding each other and supporting each other. But yeah, 4 days a week. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Talk about. I recently had. I have a few. My brain is going in different directions because
Okay.
there's some questions, right? And I'm actually. I'll tell you the two before I forget them, just in case they don't come back. The first one, I had a conversation with Dr. Miriam Merrill. Dr. Anthony Grant and Anthony Asma
Yes.
about having campus recreation as a part of your responsibilities as the director of athletics. So when I ask you a question about that, the other one is I had a recent conversation with Dr. Charles Small from Valparaiso about social work concepts within higher education, specifically in college athletics.
Mm-hmm.
And both are interesting, and my brain is going in both directions. I want to ask you about both. I'll start with the campus life and campus recreation thing. Tell me about how you even mentioned there's some benefit to that. Tell me about how you see that as a benefit in terms of what you do as a benefit to your role in athletics, I guess.
Yeah, I will say, when I interviewed for the job, that was the one thing I knew I was going to have to
Figure out.
figure out for the interview, and then once I got here, and the best advice I had was make sure you have a really good director of rec, and I actually do. So she's been wonderful, but it was foreign to me because at the previous institutions that I had worked at, with the exception of Stanford, athletics and rec were separate. And so, I think with Division III, my staff is actually pretty robust for Division III, but much less staffed than in Illinois, for
Okay.
example. And so, when it comes to management of facilities, I don't have a facilities staff of 20 just for athletics.
Okay.
So the institution, because we are merged together with rec, they provide assistance for maintenance of the building and for the grounds, for our fields, and so that's been a great benefit of managing rec. But then, I'm personally someone who's very, very, I place a high priority on health and well-being and fitness in my own life. And so I actually enjoy being able to provide spaces and programs for the community to really meet their fitness needs and to help our student population not only meet their fitness needs, but to give them opportunities to explore leadership, for example, through intramurals and club sports. So that's been personally rewarding. I think also for me professionally, I touched upon this a little bit ago, but really understanding the full operation of the university, whether it be budgets or different ways of collaborating with campus partners. I've had to do that a lot overseeing rec. Um, and it ranges from hosting graduations in this building to providing physical spaces that are more inclusive. For example, we had women on our campus who said that the physical space of our weight room is not inviting for them, right? So being mindful that this space should be accessible and comfortable for all students, not just varsity athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's pushed me a little bit more to be a campus partner. And I think that's important in our role as athletic directors. And so as I think about my own leadership development, just being a little bit mindful of the needs of the entire community. So those are just a few things. And then just also being a little bit creative in what we do to meet the needs of our students. So, for example, my rec staff is really trying to take fitness to where our students live, work, and play. So we're offering programming for graduate students at their colleges here on campus so that they don't have to come to us, to this building. So those are just a few examples, but I am very intentional about including them and including rec, I should say. So
Yeah.
when we merged prior to my hire, prior to me being hired, I was very intentional to make sure that we include recreation in our vision for athletics and in our mission, that my director of rec is a part of my executive leadership team, right? So that's very intentional. And I've learned a lot from her and just from the process of being merged.
Yeah, there's this aspect of I guess for the lack of a better word, gathering data, meaning all student athletes and most, if not just many, of students who aren't student athletes using facilities in a intramural or campus recreation or fitness type aspect gives an insight into the temperature of campus that I'm not sure other departments may get. And from my outside looking in, that seems like a benefit in itself. So when you are asking for resources or
Yes.
fundraising or internally asking for more budget or however those things work, you are coming from a very informed and hand in the water type, hands-on perspective. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, if you just look at how our budgets are set up, in Division III, many of us, our budgets are made up of student fees. The students
Right.
are paying my operating budget.
Yeah, exactly.
So because of that, I need to make sure that I'm including them in the decisions that we make and the services that we provide. And yes, sometimes it can be tough because there's this tension with space, right? Why do varsity athletes get priority times for practice when I'm paying student fees and I want to be able to use the tennis courts, right? So having to manage that, the benefit of having rec and athletics combined is because of that inclusion of rec and having that staff a part of my team, they feel like we can work together and it doesn't need to be athletics versus rec. But yeah, I think there is this responsibility that I have for the health and well-being, and in particular, the physical health of our community, just by overseeing recreation and wellness.
Yeah, and you have an informed perspective when you sit down at the table with the other decision makers on campus because you are responsible for those
Exactly.
experiences.
It helps with resources, right? Because
100%.
whether it's building space, equipment, upkeep,
Right.
or even getting Wi-Fi at our rec fields, which we don't have right now. So it's when I can say this is bigger than just varsity athletics,
Hmm.
usually people listen, right?
Right.
This is
Yeah.
about you. This is about the community. This is about all of our students. So
Yeah. 100%. I'll ask a couple of questions here and then we'll wrap. I made mention about Dr. Charles Small's conversation on this podcast about social work concepts in college athletics or in higher education. Actually, you have mentioned a couple of them. You think about the individual, right? The individual well-being of the individual, right? And their identity. And then you think about the groups that individual is in and the identities of that group. And then you think about those groups in the big group of athletics or even bigger,
mm-hmm.
the institution as a whole, and having the wherewithal to make sure that you are concerned with the individual well-being while also being concerned with the subgroups and the group overall when you're in a leadership position. I tend to think, and I don't know if this is going to sound right, but I think there's a PR, the branding of social work is, to me, is been off because those concepts to me tie to leadership. And I don't know if social work is taught in terms of leadership or in terms of just helping people who seem like they need help. So I wonder for you, that aspect of, and now that you're in the chair for almost 3 years, that aspect of taking care of the individual while also taking care of the institution. Tell me about how your brain has processed in that, especially when you have so many different roles under your responsibility.
Yeah, I think, and I'll focus my answer a little bit more on the student athlete. I think creating a sense of belonging is really important, and that extends beyond their student athlete identity. And um, I'm a huge proponent of supporting our student athletes' multiple identities. So, for example, when I was at Illinois, I was very involved in the DEI work that we did in the department. And so for me to be an athletic director now, I've placed a huge emphasis on inclusion And when our Black student athletes came to me a year ago, letting me know that they wanted to create a community for themselves, I was completely supportive. And now we have a Black student, they call themselves BSAG, Black Student Athlete Group. And so I'm very engaged and present in that space. And now we have a queer athlete club. They call themselves Quack. And they have launched effective this academic year. And we also have a Jewish student athlete group that is forming. Okay. And so just making sure that I manipulate our budget to be able to support their needs has been a priority going into this upcoming year. And even related to that, though, it's more than just letting the students create the groups. It's also letting our coaches know that we need to support them. So I'll give you an example. Last week, we had our first coaches meeting of the year, and I let them know that I met with a rabbi in the summer who informed me that he's getting the sense that our Jewish student athletes are feeling like their Jewish identity is not being supported, understood, and in particular around two Jewish religious observances. And Yom Kippur is one. And so I let our coaches know that we've got a lot of Jewish student athletes who on this day, and I gave them the date, and then I followed up with an email of all of our religious observances so that they're aware. I said, you might want to be transparent and you might want to let your students know that on this Monday, it's okay if you need to miss workouts instead of just letting your students know passive aggressively or indirectly that you support all students, right? Yeah, when right. You say you can have this day off, that is very different. Or if you restructure practice that week, move workouts around so that day is off for everyone, it goes a long way. So I think that's my way of really trying to support our student athletes and their multiple identities to create this sense of belonging for them.
In the bigger group, right? As you go up subgroups to the big group.
Exactly.
Last question here. I know you participated in one or more of the NCAA leadership development programs, whether it be the Institute Pathways or Achieving Communication Excellence. There's a number of them that they put on. I wonder about that experience for you and really experiences in professional development programs in general throughout your career.
Yeah, so I was at the University of Illinois when I decided that I wanted to pursue the athletic director path. And that decision was really the result of being inspired by Josh Whitman, who was the athletic director there, and just watching him on a day-to-day basis, watching how he moves, the decisions he makes, why he makes the decisions he makes, really inspired me. And so I was not really involved with professional development at all through the NCAA or any organization. And so I told him that I wanted to be an AD. And so we decided to apply. I think he had to nominate me for the Pathway program. So I did the D1 Pathway track 2018 to 2019. And that experience itself encouraged me even more to be an athletic director. It was a lot of work, very eye-opening. But I also knew that I wasn't going to just put my name for any old job, right? I was very particular about where I wanted to live and the type of institution I wanted to work at. So the NCAA Pathway program was very, very, very helpful for me. I will never forget the first day when we had to present our first day on the job as an AD, our first speech to our staff. And just really trying to figure out what I was going to say, how I was going to say in a room full of strangers, right? So that wasn't easy. But I think what I got out of that first 2 days was really thinking about my values And everybody says, oh, what are your values? Everybody says integrity. Everybody says integrity. But what does that mean when you have to make a tough decision? You have to go back to your values. And people have cookie cutter values. You hear the same ones circulated all the time. But when you have to make a tough decision, and we see issues every day on D1, D3 ticker, it makes me think, what would I have done if I was that AD? And I go back to my values, right? It's easier said than done when you're not in the situation, but I like to use that as practice, right? When I see what's going on in the different institutions, the landscape of college athletics in general, that was very, very helpful. Meeting colleagues who, a few of us have now become ADs, and just having people that you can go to and who understand, your day to day was very valuable. And I think the third thing that I really found to be very helpful and very, very important as I went through the search process was just thinking about not just my values, but my why. Why do I do what I do?
Right.
And it can't just be, because I was a student athlete and I love sports. But what is it that sets me apart from others that led me to where I'm at today? I think that was very important. And so I'm very thankful for the Pathway program, because they helped prepare me for this job, which was really the first athletic director job that I applied for and interviewed for. And so didn't know what I was doing, but I just kept going with the flow.
It sounds like it paid off for you. I will ask one quick follow-up. That first speech that you gave during the Pathway program and the actual first speech that you gave as an athletic director, were they widely different or were they similar?
Well, you know what? My answer to that was it was COVID when I got this job. And so that created complications. So my first speech was actually an email. And then I had scheduled a call with the coaches and a call with the athletes. So it was not what I had prepared for Pathway, but some of the themes were the same, right? It was really about, why did I even want this job, right? What opportunities did I see that I could bring, right, to make us better? And then what my plan was going to be, the first 90 days. But yeah, so I think the template was more or less the same, but I didn't give as many details because I didn't have the same setup. So.
Right. Well, which is excellent. Keiko, it sounds like you're doing excellent things down there at Emory, and I am sure that all the people that are relatively new in the position, even the president is relatively new in the positions there on campus, are happy to have you responsible for important aspects of the student experience, including athletics and campus recreation and campus life. And I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Well, thank you so much. This has been fun.
Yes, ma'am. That was Keiko Price. She's the Associate Vice President of Campus Life and Director of Athletics at Emory. And of course, I am Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.